91 is probably not coming free, but he's also not leaving Ohio State. Tyleik Williams sticking around with the Buckeyes, and I maybe it's hyperbole. I think it is a huge deal for Ohio State. Welcome to the Podcast Daily. That is Bill Landis and Jeremy Birmingham. I'm Austin Ward, and this was probably not a surprising decision, Bill, but anytime you get that actual confirmation from the player himself, as Tyleik Williams announced on Wednesday night, and given the nature, the position, the makeup of that room, getting one of the best defensive tackles in America back is good for Ohio State.
It sure is. I when we left the interviews with Ohio State players in December, before they went to Dallas, it felt pretty clear to me at that time that Tyleik was going to come back. But as it kept dragging on, you start to get doubts start to creep in a little bit, and you wonder if something happened in the bowl game, or maybe he got different feedback, or something different than what was the plan was happening with Ohio State in terms of guys coming back. But no, this is I think the first domino in a line of a couple that we expect to fall here in terms of guys coming back to this roster. But I think I'm with you on it being perhaps the most important. We'll see when all the dust settles, I guess. But that room was going to be incredibly inexperienced if they lost both Mike Hall and Tyleik Williams. And we still have to see what happens with Ty Hamilton as well. But you don't want to be in a world where your defensive tackle room is basically a bunch of guys who have never played before. And now it's like Tyleik Williams and a bunch of guys who have never played before. So that's pretty good.
I think that it's really remarkable that it's not a surprise, because we have been talking about it for a few weeks that we expected this to happen. But if you go back to the start of the season, if you were to project ahead 5 months and you said, okay, who on this defensive line should you just assume is gone, right? I think we all would have said Tyleik Williams at the top of the list, whether that be for the NFL or the transfer portal, or just a guy who seemed like he didn't ever really love football. And then something clicked with Tyleik Williams this year, and it has been a light bulb moment, not just for him, obviously, but for the Ohio State defense. And I really don't think you can understate the importance of getting him back, as you guys have said. He was disruptive all year long. He was, first 8 games of the season until Jack Sawyer really started to come on, probably the best defensive lineman for Ohio State, maybe the best defensive player on the team outside of Denzel Burke all year long. And it's huge. I mean, it also is huge for just this narrative that everything in Columbus was falling apart. And that I think is a bigger, more important piece of that today, January 4th, than it is and will be on August 4th when they're starting fall practice.
I didn't want to just say once again that I was wrong about Tyleik Williams fulfilling his potential, which I was. But I wanted to find somewhere other way to point to it to illustrate his impact. And it can be as simple sometimes as the counting numbers. And Tyleik Williams had multiple tackles in every single game this year. So if we're talking about a player that the first 2 years, it was flashes of potential, and could he translate to be a play in, play out, game in, game out contributor for Ohio State? That by itself is pretty significant. He wound up multiple tackles in every game. He had 10 tackles for loss in the course of the year. So there's nothing to sneeze at by itself. Those were spread out over 9 games. So he was doing this on a regular basis. It wasn't just that he popped a couple times and had some, freaky statistical performances, which is what he did in the first couple years, and often against the lesser teams on Ohio State's schedule. So he showed up and showed out pretty much every time. And I think that combined with Mike Hall already declaring for the draft, still some lingering uncertainty, you would expect maybe that Ty Hamilton would come back, but we don't. He didn't really answer that question one way or another in Texas. But I'm trying not to be a prisoner of the moment, because I know if Travion Henderson says he's coming back, or JT Tuimoloau or Jack Sawyer, I could say, oh, well, those are the most impactful guys. But looking at the room, Travion is probably the only one who would be close in my mind. And I think, given the importance of winning up front, and I think a lot of Hero Kanu, and I think a lot of Caden McDonald and Jason Moore and this next wave up. But and Tywone Malone, if you had to replace both of those top 2 guys at the top of the depth chart, that would be a pretty daunting proposition.
Yeah, it would. Tyleik had 53 tackles this year, which feels like a lot for a defensive tackle. It was only 30 fewer than Tommy Eichenberg, who was a team leader, and Steel Chambers, it was also the team leader. Last year, Tyleik had 100 fewer tackles than Tommy Eichenberg. He was a really, really productive player for them. And it's not, I don't know that we consider anything other than tackles for losses or sacks as good production for defensive tackles, but I think we should. And Jim Knowles I think a lot throughout the season made the point that like defensive tackles were making the plays themselves this year a lot of the time, and Tyleik kind of spearheaded that, and he did it too well. I don't think he was 100% healthy. Like we saw him hurt himself in camp. We were like the first practice, we're like, oh boy, like here Tyleik's season's already getting derailed, and he was available for the opener. He played all year, I think, with a knee brace on. So I think it's possible that he can take his game even to another level next year. The one thing it's not a concern, but he played a lot of snaps. He played 645 snaps this year, which is up there in terms of defensive tackles in the country. That just feels like a lot. So there's still going to be, a premium put on some of the guys you mentioned there, Austin, about like stepping up and taking on a larger share of the role. But I think Tyleik has like All-American potential now that he's coming back based off his production this past season.
The goal or the real crux here is how does he take that next step? Because he may not, because of all the reps that he played this year and all the snaps he took, he may not need to do a lot in the spring because you have 5 defensive tackles behind him that haven't played much. But he does need to be physically better as far as his continued growth and evolution of him as a physical specimen. I think we were all surprised he played as much as he did this year because he didn't look like you go down the roster and you find guy after guy who's like, oh, look at that transformation. Look what he's done. Look. And he didn't really look that different, but yet the play was much different. And obviously the effort he gave was significantly different. And so now if you can put those two things together, maybe with understanding, like I'm walking into a real money year and a potential All-American bid and coming back to lead this defense, I do wonder, like, how high is that ceiling? He was a really highly ranked player coming out of high school, and a guy that Ohio State and Larry Johnson thought had the potential to be an All-American. And it's sometimes the in the trenches, it takes 3 or 4 years for these guys to hit that stride. And you can see that he's definitely hit it.
I think what I really appreciate there with Tyleik Williams is that he was pretty candid and open about what was holding him back the first 2 years. He needed that work ethic to take the next step, that he'd been lazy. There were some injuries as well. When a player says that, I mean, A, you get bonus points for being honest, but B, you have to take that self-evaluation and do something with it. Tyleik Williams absolutely did that. And so then when he continues to talk about the process and say where he is physically, how much the knee is bothering him or not bothering him, how much conditioning he's got or not got to go through the course of the season and play this many snaps, or when he says the difference in me is just being more mature, you can believe that because he said nothing that tells you that he's lying or doesn't understand the situation that he's facing. And so 3 weeks ago, when he's talking about his decision-making process and approaching it as being more mature and everything, sitting down with his family and taking stock of where he is, like he could have certainly gone to the NFL and been a 2nd or a 3rd round pick. But when he's talking about, Bill, you mentioned this, earlier on Wednesday, that like in those things he mentioned, who's coming back, how many of my brothers are going to be there, what other pieces are going to be added. He was thinking about all these things inclusively and also where he could get better. That's a very mature approach and a good sign for Ohio State when you focus on the who's coming back part.
Yeah, I think earlier in Tyleik's career, and this I don't necessarily mean this as a criticism because we know this is a business, but I think early on when you talk to him, you mostly got the vibe that he was like kind of looking out for himself and like mostly focused on his own production. And I think a lot of what this decision came down to is Ohio State going to have a chance to win the way it wants to win next year. Because if they weren't, I don't think if Tyleik didn't believe it was going to be, I don't think he would have come back. I think he would have just gone to the NFL, gotten his money, and tried to be on a winning team there. So I do think that matters to him. And I'm not necessarily saying it never did, but maybe it matters more. And when you get your best players kind of thinking that way, as opposed to solely thinking about what do I have to do to get to the league, like what do I have to do to get the most production possible, and not really worry about team results. I think that puts your defense in a really good spot. And also to your point, Austin, like this feels like a tell that he's expecting a lot to come back now. And he's the first one. We didn't know what this would look like if they would all announce at once. And maybe it doesn't end up that every single guy that we thought might come back a couple weeks ago does come back. But I don't think Tyleik would be doing this if all of a sudden all those guys kind of change their minds. So now that this has happened, based off what he said, I'm expecting a rather large crop of players to return for Ohio State.
I'm not sure why people would change their mind. I think that there's this bizarre notion that Friday night's game would push people to all of a sudden like, oh, everything's falling apart. Well, this program's over. Let's jump ship. I mean, nobody had that opinion after the Michigan game. I don't think even after a disappointment in the Cotton Bowl, especially because the defense played so well. Like, I don't think that there's any reason for those guys to look at it and be like, oh, you know what? Maybe this isn't worth it. In fact, I think in a lot of ways, it probably motivates them even more. Now, they obviously hear the outside noise. They hear all the conversation about what's going on and is the program in trouble. These are the guys in the building. They know it better than anybody. And they're all talking to one another. And so, you know, to what you said, Bill, like maybe they don't all come back. I'm sure there's guys having some conversations, some last minute conversations. Believe it or not, they still have another 10 days to figure this out, which is insane. In my opinion, I don't know why that's needed, but whatever. I guess the NFL likes to drag things on, but I do think that it's a really positive sign for the future if you extrapolate it out. And Ohio State is in a position to maybe have the best returning defense in the country, and it starts in the middle, and you can't do that without Tyleik Williams.
Shared a few thoughts on Wednesday night with our Subtext subscribers about that decision from Tyleik Williams. If you want a 2-week trial right there, you can hit us up at 614-662-4509. Earlier on Wednesday, Berm dropped some notes about a quarterback visiting in the transfer portal.
Yeah, it's not really a surprise. We talked about Will Howard a little bit a few days ago, and the tea leaves were all lining up for that way. And I think that the fact that Ohio State is bringing him in for an official visit at the end of the week is a surefire sign that they're willing to bring him into the roster, because if you weren't willing to do that, you don't risk the conversations that you had to have with Devin Brown and Lincoln Kienholz about the visit, which in itself is a fairly telling thing. I think it's pretty much a done deal for Ohio State and Will Howard. I know that some people are interested in Caden Salter, the Liberty transfer, but that one seems like it's like as soon as he got in the portal, it's like he was going to Auburn pretty much as soon as he got in the portal. So we'll see if Miami can muck that up or someone else can. But Ohio State and Will Howard seem like a really good fit, and this visit that's coming up over the next couple of days is pretty much a formality, I think. From what I understand, now the question becomes, guys, like, what does Devin Brown do? We're recording this on Wednesday night at 7:15. Ohio State players, because they played in the New Year's Six bowl game, have a couple extra days or an extra day to announce their portal decision. So there's about 4 hours and 45 minutes for any players left to still get into the portal. From people I talked to on Wednesday, the conversation was they think that they're done with players leaving. So I guess we'll see if that holds up over the next 4.5 hours. If something changes by the time this publishes at 5 a.m., sorry, my bad. We'll talk about it later. But I think right now, at least, it appears that Devin Brown, fully aware of the situation, is willing to compete through the spring at least and see what happens, which I think is great. And I think it says a ton about Devin Brown, even though I know this is a crappy situation for him, but because the way the Cotton Bowl went, he didn't have a chance to really stake his claim on anything.
So it feels like Ohio State is working towards a marriage and partnership with Will Howard, and Bill, before the visit, is already like, you know what? This other guy, let's get Caden Salter out of there.
Yeah, like he's a more exciting player, I think. I'm not. He's going to go to Auburn, right? Like I'm not getting my hopes up there. And it's not. The more I've watched Will Howard more in the last couple of days, just to kind of get more familiar with him, and there are definitely things to like there. So I don't know that it's a slam dunk that Caden Salter would be better than Will Howard in this offense. You just kind of like watch. I do the thing that I tell people not to do, which is watch highlights and get really excited. So I'm falling victim to that as well. But I get it. Like he's going. Hugh Freeze recruited him to Liberty, right? Like he's going to play for the guy that recruited him after he left Tennessee, was kicked out of Tennessee. I don't know exactly.
He didn't volunteer to leave the Volunteers.
Oh, how about that? Yeah. So it seems like it's. I don't want to unnecessarily get people's hopes up or like throw misinformation out there. It does seem like it's going to be Will Howard or I don't know, or nothing else, I guess, in this particular window.
Yeah. So what is the rest? Sorry, Berm. So what's the rest of your film study, Bill, shown? I mean, we watched, what game was it? Like Troy or something?
Troy, I think it was, yeah.
When we were in Dallas. And then what else have you seen since then? Why if Ryan Day and Lincoln Riley want somebody, there's probably a good reason for that. What else have you picked up?
He's pretty fast. Like he's like straight line speed is a little deceptive, I guess, for a guy who's that big. He's like 6'5", 242. I think is what he's officially listed at, and he moves better than you might expect for a guy who's that size.
Like Josh Allen.
Yeah, he's definitely not Josh Allen.
There's only one Josh Allen, okay?
Him and Josh
cool.
Allen have two things in common. They're both 6'5" and they're both white, and that's the end of it. But I don't think we compare their games beyond that. But he's like a little bit of a gunslinger in a way that like makes me a little nervous.
Like Josh Allen?
Yeah, but well, maybe. You know what? He is Josh Allen. No.
Does he turn the ball over a lot when he shouldn't?
Yes.
Like Josh Allen?
Yeah. Yeah. Does he
I don't like where this is going. Can we end this?
Josh Allen dates somebody famous, right? Doesn't he date
he dates
the girl?
Wants.
The
Kate Upton.
No, that's Justin Verlander, the girl from one of the Pitch Perfect movies. I don't know.
Anna Kendrick?
Maybe.
Brittany Snow?
Nope. Let's keep guessing actresses who are Pitch Perfect.
He knows all of them. We finally stumbled into Berm's specialty.
No, she wasn't in the first one. She was in one of the sequels.
Haley Steinfeld?
Yeah, that one.
CJ Perry.
Oh. The sequels sucked. We're not going to dive into that. I think that the interesting thing here is that that got completely derailed. Bill was about to say how he was not Josh Allen, and somehow we talked about Pitch Perfect.
Somehow he ended up dating Haley Steinfeld. Good for him.
Do you guys see this as the first sign, the first like hint that Ryan Day is taking this offseason in a much different mindset than he would have maybe the last year?
I don't know. Parker Fleming's still employed.
I just can't say yes. I just can't.
Yeah,
I mean,
I'm not there.
I think it is
I think you're both wrong, but I
understand. I understand your point. I think it's an encouraging, bordering on aggressive roster management move. And if, we've argued semantically over what that actually means for using transfer portals and additions and recruiting classes and all that over the last couple of years. But I mean, he could have stood pat a month ago and said, Kyle McCord, you are going to start the Cotton Bowl. You will have the first reps going into spring ball. The status quo likely would have stayed put. Maybe you would have lost Devin Brown in that situation. I don't know. But that would have been the conservative move to just say, we're good with that. And once that domino fell, could have said the same thing to Devin Brown, and he did not. So in terms of that part of Ryan Day's job, I think, Berm, that you are probably correct. But there have already been numerous opportunities with the rest of the program to be quote unquote aggressive, or the way I like to look at it, be more urgent. And he's not done that. And the Parker Fleming part is the most obvious. And because that has not happened over the course of a month, I can't say, he's back. Aggressive Ryan Day's here. I'm not seeing that yet.
Yeah. I mean, I get what you're saying. I just think it's going to end up all happening. And so as we've seen and talked about, I just wonder if this should be a sign to say, this is him somewhat acknowledging, because this conversation with Will Howard started like a month ago. It wasn't just in the last week. Acknowledging that maybe he evaluated wrong on Kyle McCord. I also think that the conversation that you have to have with Devin Brown and Lincoln Kienholz, or that you've had to have had at this point, is interesting. And I think the decision to say we're going after a 1-year guy here, like, is a good way to salve any potential ego bruises that may have happened. This is not us throwing away your future, but we're not good enough right now, and we need. So I actually really like the move. It's not official yet, but when it does become official, I think people should be stoked about it, because you're getting one of the 3 best quarterbacks in the transfer portal, and I think that why would that not be viewed as a overwhelming positive, especially when you consider, how the offense looked with what we saw in the Cotton Bowl.
Yeah, I think the move could be viewed as a positive in that way. I just wish that everything else in the program was treated with the same urgency, and it doesn't seem to be.
Yeah, I just wonder if we're not privy to it. That's the way I see it. Like, I think there's probably things happening that we're not privy to, and I would just implore people to let the AFCA happen this weekend in San Antonio and see how things shake out after that.
Yeah, I'm willing.
The American Football Coaches Association annual meetings are happening this weekend, and as you guys know, but maybe listeners and readers and people don't, this is the weekend where the donuts get made in a lot of the coaching world, right? Where people find new jobs, for example.
Somehow they've been able to do that a lot over the last month without going to a convention and getting drunk, but maybe there will be some delicious donuts made.
There's a difference. Those are coaches that people want to hire.
Oh.
Wow.
You've
Just
really cut to the core.
I just want people to it's okay. We're in a recruiting dead period. Get through these. Things are going to happen. Okay. They're going to happen because there's no way that Ryan Day can allow the status quo to maintain and feel like it is serving his job next year or his job in the future. This is a guy this is his first head coaching job. And I feel like if it ends in the way that people are preparing for it to end in this doom and gloom, it affects the rest of his life in the profession. You don't go from coaching Texas to coaching FAU unless something goes horribly wrong, right? So, you know what I mean?
What a weirdly specific proposition.
Nobody wants that to happen. And I don't think Ryan Day is going to put himself in a position selfishly to allow that to occur. And I want people to just let the process play out. That's all. And that includes you two. I'm sorry to have to do this to you on the podcast, but I need you guys to stop.
You're asking me to trust the process? I can do that.
Trust the process.
I'm just saying take the layup. Think how much different the rest of the perception of the program could have been for the last month if the first move had been made.
I get it. I get that. But at some point, the fact is you haven't been playing the game yet. Now you're playing the game. You're in the end game now, gentlemen. We're in the end game now. Who's Fraba? He's
got the gauntlet.
It's the snap. All
right. Snap. We're done. Happy Thursday. Enjoy the rest of your day. Tyleik Williams, congratulations to him and Ohio State on making that decision. Big visit coming. Burn, do we know what day the visit begins, or is that still being worked out for Will Howard?
It's still being worked out. My expectation is that it probably begins Friday, but no one's been specific about it yet.
All right. So a couple big moves there. One done, one potentially.
They did have another transfer on campus on Wednesday. Derek Graham, offensive lineman from Troy, 6'5", 310 pounds, big kid, started every game at Troy. I know it's not the thing that's going to get people all, excited, but I liked what I saw. Film is what it is. PFF grades are what they are. You need 2 or 3 offensive linemen here. He may not be like the creme de la creme, but if you can get quality depth, you get quality depth.
Okay. Berm wrote about that at ohiostate.rivals.com as well, so you can check out that as we try and keep our fingers on the pulse of everything going on with roster management season as it continues to swing along with NFL draft decisions coming in for Ohio State. For Bill Landis and Jeremy Birmingham, I am Austin Ward. This has been the Podcast Daily. We'll talk to you tomorrow.